Robert Cohen's new novel, Amateur Barbarians, is the story of two men struggling to break free from the limitations of their lives. Teddy Hastings is in his 50s, hoping there is some adventure left for him, while Orrin Pierce, 30 and a perpetual grad student who never quite found his way, decides to put down roots in the small New England town where Teddy lives. Both are facing the crisis of middle age, and each is setting out for a new horizon, hoping to find a place other than the one they've left behind. The book is published by Scribner, and I am pleased it brings Robert Cohen back to the show. Welcome.
Thanks very much.
So one of the wonderful lines in your book says something like, every ship is romantic except the one you're sailing on. Is this the dilemma both Teddy and Orrin find themselves in?
Yeah. There was a line from Baudelaire as well that I'm going to butcher and paraphrase, but it's essentially, this life is a hospital in which every man would like to change beds. One thinks he'll get better by the stove, and one thinks he'll get better by the window. And so I conceived of this novel. I was in my early mid-40s, and I was interested in weighing both sides of that. So I have a character, Orrin, in his 30s, and a character, Teddy, in his 50s. And I was interested to see them on opposite trajectories, where they would actually have very little direct face-to-face contact in the novel, but almost like billiard balls, their trajectories would be affected by each other. And so Orrin, the younger character, is essentially a kind of disaffected, permanent grad student type who cannot quite root himself to the ground, what they call in Yiddish a Luftmensch. And Teddy is someone who is almost too rooted to the ground, who's dug in and built and built, and now his children are grown, and his wife is very busy, and his school is up and running, and there's nothing left to build. There's only maintenance of what he already has, and that sends him off into his own search for something.
I was going to ask, so they're both sort of responding to a desire for change in their lives. So how do their responses to this impulse differ?
Well, for Teddy, what happens is he has a brush with death, with his brother's death, and then he has his own health scare. And that sends him into a kind of absolute place where the niceties of middle-class midlife just no longer obtain for him at all. And he begins to need, he reads explorers late at night in his bed, and he begins to need some kind of extreme experience that will test him in a way. And Orrin, I would say, is also looking for an extreme experience that will test him, but in his case, because he's never had the conventional niceties of a home and a family and a job, those things that Teddy and many of us would take for granted are to him an extreme experience, and to him they're a greater test than going to Nepal would have been.
Now, how does that manifest itself with Orrin?
Well, without giving away all the fine intricacies of the plot.
I have had this problem. You just ask Christoph Waltz, giving away too much. Sorry.
But I guess I would say roughly that Orrin, that as Teddy steps away from his life running this school, Orrin becomes gradually insinuated into the empty chair, and he finds himself for the first time staying with a job that's rather humdrum and boring, and beginning to relish the everyday. He begins to relish some of the very confinement that Teddy is fleeing, and one manifestation of all that is that he begins a rather uncertain flirtation with Teddy's abandoned wife, Gail, and who has her own trajectory in the novel, although she's not one of the main point of view characters, but she's sort of the center around which all the characters orbit.